Thank you, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. I'm Councillor McLean and I am Vice Chairman of the Commission, sitting in the chair for this part of the meeting. We're going to slightly reorder the agenda, but before I get on to that, can I welcome Superintendent Kenny and Alison O'Meara to the meeting this evening, along with the Chief Executive, who will be speaking to us a little bit later on. So the first item on the agenda I'd like to take forward is apologies for absence.
I've received apologies from Councillors Mackenzie Boyle, Brown and Eberle, and I believe Councillor Smith may be substituting for Councillor Eberle, but is not here presently, and I can see that Councillors Watts and Eggleston are online.
Councillor Watts and Councillor Eggleston, can you confirm you're in attendance verbally, please?
Here.
Councillor Eggleston?
Yes, good evening, I'm here as well.
Thank you. Okay, what was item 3 on the agenda is minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated. Do any members have any questions about the accuracy of those minutes? If not, are we happy to approve them as a true and correct record of the meeting? Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Barnard, Councillor Hafji, thank you very much. All those in favour? They're approved. Thank you. Item 4 is declaration of interest and party whip. Does any member have any declaration to make? None? Okay, thank you very much. Then I'll move on to what was the first item on the agenda, the election of chair. Do we have a nomination for chair of the commission? Councillor Hafji.
Yeah, very happy to nominate Councillor Foster, please.
That's seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Barnard. All those in favour? That's carried. Welcome to the chair.
Are there any urgent items of business, please, Harry?
None notified.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 6, public participation. Have we received any requests under the public participation scheme?
I'm not aware of any public participation requests, Chair.
Thank you very much. We're now going to adjourn the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission and declare you are now sitting as the Crime and Disorder Committee. So first of all, I'd like to welcome the following guests to the meeting. Susan Halliwell, Chair of the Community Safety Partnership, welcome. Superintendent Helen Kenny, Superintendent of Operations for the East Berkshire Local Command Unit, Thames Valley Police, welcome. Alison O'Meara, Head of Youth Justice and Community Safety, and Audrey Johnson, Assistant Director, Early Help and Communities, who is joining us online. Welcome to you all. First of all, you're going to give a presentation, I understand. Look forward to seeing it.
Good evening, everybody. Superintendent Kenny and I are really pleased to be here this evening to share the Community Safety Partnerships Annual Performance Report with you. The format of the presentation this evening, sorry, we can go to the next slide, please, Harry, thank you. The format of the presentation this evening will include an overview of the profile of crime and disorder in Bracknell Forest, as well as comparisons with other areas. It will also include an update on the progress that we've made in the first year of our CSP plan 2025 to 28, and we will then go over to questions. There is an additional chapter in the slide deck, which is about the background to the CSP. It provides a bit more context. We encourage you to have a look at those slides because they explain that we are so much more than just a quarterly meeting that takes place every quarter. We have a performance group that holds the subgroups of the CSP to account, and together with that we have 6 themed strategic groups which oversee 11 operational groups. So those groups will be the ones that focus in on people and places. Next slide, please, Harry. And the next one. So this first slide looks at the rate of crime and antisocial behaviour in Bracknell Forest. It uses a comparison of per 1,000 population, which is good because it's like for like comparison, and it's of all unitary authorities in England as at September 2025. You can see Bracknell Forest is depicted there by the red bar, and we are sitting at the 12th lowest rate of crime and antisocial behaviour out of the 61 unitary authorities. Our position has improved from last year. We've moved from 13th lowest to 12th lowest, and our rate has also improved from 6.2 incidents per 1,000 population to 5.27 incidents per 1,000 population. Next slide, please, Harry. This slide looks at a comparison of Bracknell Forest with the Thames Valley Force area. Again, the same comparator is used per 1,000 population, and you can see there that the force average is depicted with a green line. So in the year ending June 2025, the crime rate in Bracknell Forest was lower than average for the Thames Valley area. And you can see there that Bracknell Forest is within the middle group. So it has the 7th lowest crime rate out of the 16 areas, and that's for all police recorded crime for that 12-month period. If we look at data from 9 months prior to that, so the year ending September 24, it showed that Bracknell Forest had the 9th lowest rate, so we've improved 2 places since that time. Bracknell Forest was still lower than the force average then, as well as now. Next slide, please, Harry. This is a different comparison, and it compares Bracknell Forest with our most similar CSPs, again per 1,000 population. And because we're comparing with our most similar CSPs, that is probably a better comparison to have. So in this comparison, we are the 5th lowest rate in all police recorded crime for the same 12-month period as the previous slide, and this was lower than the average crime rate across similar areas. If we look back at the 9 months prior, it showed that Bracknell Forest was 6th lowest with a crime rate normal for the group, so we have improved 1 position since September 24. Next slide, please, Harry. This table goes a little bit deeper and starts looking at a comparison between Bracknell Forest and our most similar CSPs, but across various crime types. Again, it's 1,000 per 1,000 population, and there are 15 most similar groups. You can see there with the green arrows that depicts where our position has improved in comparison to the other areas, and conversely, the red arrows indicate where we have worsened slightly in comparison. Looking at the previous 9 months comparison, we have had some position changes, but for the year ending June 25, Bracknell Forest has no crime types which are higher than normal for the group. So all are either normal or lower than normal for the group. Our last comparison graph, sorry, Harry, I forget to prompt you. This is a comparison over a longer time period, so it's a 3-year time period, and you can see there in the red with the red line, that's Bracknell Forest. The Thames Valley is the orange one, and then the average of the most similar group is the green one. In the quarter ending June 25, the crime rates were down in Bracknell Forest compared with the corresponding quarter in 24. Bracknell Forest crime rates are below or on par with the most similar group average crime rates and are consistently below the Thames Valley Force area crime rates over the past 3 years. Next slide, please, Harry. So now we're going to look a little bit more closely at the specific data for Bracknell Forest, looking at specific crime types, and I'm going to hand over to Superintendent Kenny.
Just do a mic swap. Evening, everybody. So I'm just going to focus on the next few slides, looking specifically at Thames Valley data and some comparisons we can draw from Bracknell and the wider Thames Valley area. So the first thing I want to just draw your attention to is the last column on that slide there, which is the figure for all crime. And I think this really just echoes what Alison's demonstrated, as crime is low across Bracknell, and that's a really, really good positive position for us to be in. So overall, for all crime, we are 10% down for quarters 1 and 2 comparing to the same quarters for last year. So a really positive place to be. I did just want to draw your attention to the ASB column, because it does look like a bit of an anomaly there. So if you look on the ASB column, we have increased by 53% for ASB crime and 44% for ASB crime-related incidents, which feels like a really big increase in ASB. But just to add a little bit of context around that, so in previous inspections, it was found that Thames Valley Police wasn't actually very good at recording ASB. So we might have been recording a crime, but we weren't very good on our systems at recording when it was ASB related as well as a crime. So therefore we weren't really compliant with Home Office counting rules. So we identified some improvement was required. So over the last year, we've worked really hard to increase our recording standards for ASB, and this has contributed to why we've got such a big increase in ASB records. So as well as that, we also had a big media campaign in the summer to increase public's reporting of ASB, which will have contributed in some way as well. And this isn't just obviously something that we've seen in Bracknell, because that work has been force-wide. You can see in the force figures it's replicated as well. And then next slide, please, Harry. So the next slide shows our crimes involving knife. So this is not possession of a knife or bladed article, but this is something we called knife-enabled crime. So that is crimes where a knife is seen, used, or even just mentioned in the commission of an offence. So we have seen across Bracknell, we've had 22 crime-related or crime-enabled incidents for these 2 quarters, which is an increase in 57%. So as part of our kind of CSP performance, we have looked into why we've seen such an increase. Within those 22, they are a very small number which are domestic-related offences, and a small number are business robberies, so that is shopliftings or robberies where a knife has been mentioned or seen in the commission of an offence. Of interest, looking at the general data, it shows that the victim profile for these offences is 80% male, and the age range is 30 to 30 years for our victim profile, followed by, which is 48%, followed by a victim profile of 31 to 50-year-olds, which is 33%. And the most likely location for these offences is open spaces. In terms of injury, because when we talk about knife-enabled crime, we often think that there'll be injury attached to that. So I've looked at the specifics even of that data. So out of those 22 offences, 1 had a serious injury recorded, which was a stabbing to a hand. 5 had slight injury recorded, which is a small cut, a bruise, or maybe some reddening of the skin. And 16 of the 22 had no injury at all. So that suggests a knife may have been seen in the offence or even just mentioned in the offence, but not actually used on another person. Of note, with those 22 increase, the highest number of incidents happened in the Bracknell South area, and that was around Great Hollands, where we saw an increase in youth-related violence. It was a particular related series that we saw, where there was effectively a feud between two groups of young males, and they were using knives in the commission of offences. So it was often robberies against each other, where maybe you had drug dealers stealing drugs from another drug dealer within that feud, or some violent related offences in relation to the ongoing feuds. So that's very much a series that has stopped now. So we've had, because of some interventions, but it is just worthy of note when we look at those 22, the majority of the increase is related to that particular problem that we had. Next slide, please. So this just touches on domestic abuse outcomes. So when we talk about outcomes, we talk about a positive disposal for a crime. So that's where you have a crime detected by way of an out-of-court disposal for less serious offences, up to a charge and going to court for more serious offences. So we are sitting at 10%, which is just slightly over the Thames Valley average of 9.1%. So still in a good pace in comparison to our other TVP areas. Then moving on to the sexual offences slide, please. So this one just shows our rape figures and our other sexual offences figures separated out. So for our rape, we have seen 63 offences, and 38 of those can be attributed to domestic abuse. So that is rape between a current or ex-partner in a domestic relationship, and the remaining ones are non-domestic rapes. This is quite a high number, so we have had a look just to kind of see why we've had that increase and what they can be attributed to. There wasn't any significant patterns that we could really see. However, what I would note in there is these are rapes and also third-party reports of rape. So these include rapes maybe where a third party, such as a teacher or a social worker, may have reported a concern to us, but the victim has failed to confirm that the offence has happened. So they're related incidents as well as confirmed offences. Of the patterns that we did see, so out of these additional ones, we did have some that were just reports that happened outside of the country actually, but we have a report of it because we would be involved in supporting the victim because the offence has happened in another country. So not an offence that we would record, but it's a rape related offence that we would have on our records. We did see some repeat victimisation within those numbers, so that may be where there was multiple suspects for an offence. So it would be one incident, but if you had multiple suspects, you would record each rape separately, but it would be one incident. Some of the other patterns that we saw were actually a significant number of these cases involved alcohol consumption and consent issues. So it may be where somebody has met somebody in a social setting, has gone back to a house whilst intoxicated, and it was an issue of consent, being that when you're intoxicated, you can't consent to sexual intercourse, and therefore it's recorded as a rape as well. So that was one of the patterns that we did see in those. And a very, very low number committed in a public space, and none of those reported rapes were stranger rapes in an open space where somebody hadn't previously met the perpetrator in some way, shape or form. So they were the main patterns that we could draw out of those rape-related cases, and in the other sexual-related offences, that's a really broad-ranging category. So that can be anything from two school children sharing inappropriate images through to somebody touching somebody's leg and making an inappropriate sexual comment. That would be classed as a sexual assault, right through to some more serious penetrative sexual assaults as well. Next slide, thank you. This slide just touches on positive action, so again, outcomes taken for rapes and other sexual offences. And I think for Bracknell, we are pretty much mirroring what our force level performance rates say for this area. Of note, we do now have a RASO, so Rape and Sexual Offences team. They're a bespoke team that support investigators with more complex rape investigations. They have better direct communication with CPS now, and the CPS themselves have a dedicated RASO team that our police team are in communication with, and that has helped with some of our outcome rates and better investigations. So that was just a highlight of some of the figures that have been included in your slides. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to go over to the second part of the presentation, which is a performance against the CSP priorities. Next slide, please, Harry. So this slide is just a reminder of the 5 priorities that the CSP adopted in its latest community safety plan. And these priorities received feedback from residents that were 83% in favour of these priorities. Next slide, please, Harry. So the next set of slides are really busy slides. There's a lot of information on them. We've tried to capture all the key activity and also give you some data. So I'm not going to go through each slide line by line because I think that will take too long, and I think most of the information you can see on the slides, it's fairly self-explanatory. But I'll just pick out a few key areas, as I say. So on the first one, under hotspots, Mill Park in Bracknell became a hotspot for antisocial behaviour over the summer. And we have an antisocial behaviour in parks and open spaces group, which gets together to problem solve things like this. It's made up of police, fire, rangers, community safety, youth outreach, and they meet regularly to tackle any problem areas. So a lot of interventions were put in place around Mill Park and Mill Pond, and we're pleased to say that with that work there were significant reductions in reports, but it is an area that we are keeping in view in case the problem does come back. Similarly, at Tesco The Meadows, we started to receive quite high levels of complaints from residents regarding vehicle noise, speeding, displaying, donutting, etc. And there again, we worked as a partnership together with Tesco and put in place, as you can read there, quite a large number of interventions. Again, we've seen quite good levels of reduction there, but we're going to review the situation in January and in April to make sure that the problem has gone away. In response to feedback that we received through our consultation around e-bikes and e-scooters being a nuisance, a public nuisance, you can see there that we did 20 operations over the 6-month period, 12 operations, and 20 e-bikes and e-scooters were seized and confiscated. There's also a really interesting example of youth restorative justice that took place following criminal damage at the Crowthorne Parish Council, and that also demonstrates that restorative justice can have a very worthwhile place in resolving some of the lower level crime and antisocial behaviour. Next slide, please. This slide just picks up some of the data against this priority and summarises the interventions that we have put in place to tackle the hotspot areas. Just for a point of clarification, a multi-agency risk framework case that's shown in that list, that's a multi-agency meeting that comes together to resolve where there's high risk to an adult that doesn't meet the threshold for adult social care. So we might identify risk or safeguarding issues. We'll come together. We will often include that person if they want to be included in that meeting and try put in place measures to keep them safe. There's no particular reason why that number dropped. It just really depends on the level of cases coming through, which we don't always anticipate or are aware of prior to them coming across our desk. And then the second part of that table is just a summary of the referrals and resolutions of cases that come into our partnership problem-solving group. As with all our work, it's multi-partner, and they deal with the most complex and challenging cases that we have in the borough where one partner isn't able to resolve the issue on their own. Next slide, please. The second priority is centred around town centre crime and antisocial behaviour. And just like the partnership problem solving group that I've just mentioned, we have a town centre one that is specific for town centre crime and antisocial behaviour, and it works across all those areas that are shown in the bullet points there. What we are focusing on at the moment is ensuring that our retailers report through all incidents of shoplifting and antisocial behaviour to the police, so that we have a true reflection of the levels of crime in the town centre, so that we can respond appropriately. Next slide, please. This is just some data that looks at levels of reports in the town centre. You can see there that Bracknell Forest's reports for crime and antisocial behaviour has increased by 44%. We have had a really close look at that data, and we do understand why it has increased. What I was saying just now about encouraging reporting through to police by retailers, that work is ongoing, so we would expect the numbers to increase there. And we also have been doing an increased e-scooter operations, as I've mentioned, and there have also been 2 police operations taking place in the town centre, all of which would have resulted in an increase in that data. Next slide, please. Our third priority, domestic abuse. We deliver a huge programme of work against this priority. It certainly is a focus for us, and you can see there that we've been really busy working on all sorts of things. One of the things I'd like to highlight is the brand new strategy, which we are out to consultation on at the moment. That is due to come back to Cabinet for adoption in the end of winter, early spring. What we did also want to flag was the Escape the Trap programme, which we're really quite excited about. It's a bespoke programme targeted at 12 to 25-year-olds to help them recognise what an unhealthy relationship looks like, what emotional abuse, coercion might look like, and how to recognise those warning signs early on in a relationship. So it's open for referrals now, and we're really hoping that it is fully subscribed to each time we do run it. Next slide, please. This slide just picks up some of the data around key areas of domestic abuse. And just to clarify with the second one, which is DA non-crimes, that refers to domestic incidents which haven't met the criminal threshold. So it could be like a verbal argument or shouting, something like that. The increase in non-crimes, which you can see there, I've checked with the other areas, and they are also experiencing a similar increase. And we think that this could be showing more confidence in reporting those lower level incidents earlier on, at earlier stages. Next slide, please. Sorry.
Councillor, can I just ask a question on that previous slide? When it talks about involving children, was that when children were present and witnessed?
That's
the
correct.
Incident?
Yes.
So essentially, it's when they are physically present.
That's right. Yes.
Thank you very
in
much.
the house, or in your location. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
The fourth priority, which is serious violence, we launched our first serious violence strategy at the end of 2024, and we've made really good progress with our action plan so far. We obviously recognise that aligned to serious violence is exploitation. The two often go hand in hand, and you may be aware that we are in the process of launching our first all-age exploitation strategy, so recognising that exploitation can happen across all life stages and all age groups, and that will be also coming to Cabinet in the later sort of winter months, early spring. Two programmes that we'd really like to highlight is the Act Now programme, which is where if a child is arrested for violence, our Act Now workers will respond within 90 minutes of being notified by police. And what we will do is present at custody, meet with the child, and offer them the Act Now intervention, which will be based on an assessment and putting together a plan to support them and to help them not reoffend. The other programme that is being launched at the moment is the Focus Diversion programme, And whereas the Act Now project intervenes with a child at point of arrest, this one intervenes far earlier. So it's for children aged 10 to 15 who are on the cusp of offending. So they might be involved in lower level crime or antisocial behaviour, but where they've come to the attention of police. There are also a number of diversion pathways that run into the programme. For example, there might be children who have been excluded from school, suspended, and who might be starting to engage with antisocial behaviour because they're bored, and we want to intervene as early as possible to prevent their behaviour escalating to serious violence levels. On the next slide, please, Harry, we've just got a little bit of data, and just to explain it, the table on the right, which is for MACE, that is a multi-agency group which looks at safeguarding children at risk of serious violence and exploitation. The various levels that are reflected there, level 0 reflects a child that has minimal risk, and level 3 is where they are at high risk. The corresponding table to the left, which is called SAVE, is for the adult equivalent. So adults are safeguarded through that group who are at risk of serious violence and exploitation. Next slide, please. So for the final priority, which is hate crime and disorder, this is the first time that we've had this as a priority. And the reason why is because following civil unrest that we had in 2024, we saw incidents of hate crime increasing, and as well as that, the impact on the psychological well-being of people in the community was also being impacted. So what we were keen to do is prevent community tensions escalating to a hate crime, and also promoting community cohesion. So what we do each week is we monitor each and every hate crime that is reported to police, and we have a look for any repeat offenders, repeat victims. We also look at locations that might come up more than once, and we also look specifically for groups in the community who might be being targeted. One thing that we would like to highlight is the Community Tension Dashboard. It's a brand new dashboard that's been developed, and what it does is it looks at picking up early indicators of community tension. So these might be racist graffiti, offensive graffiti, comments on social media. It could also be incidents that are reported through schools, children, making inappropriate or offensive hate crime comments to other children. Schools will report that through, and then we will monitor the level of community tension through that dashboard month by month. And then this slide is a simple slide that just depicts an increase in police recorded hate crime over the last 6 months compared to the same period last year. You can see there's a small increase there. It could be that people are feeling more encouraged to report because, as we know, hate crime can be a hidden crime, and that there are low levels of reporting. And we do a lot of awareness, encouraging people to come forward, that they will be taken seriously and they will be supported. So that's just an indicator of hate crime being reported through to police. We have also included in the pack 3 case studies, and I'm not going to go through them. You're welcome to read through them yourselves. But we include these each year because we're really keen to demonstrate some of the complex cases that we grapple with as a multi-agency group. So the first one is to do with domestic abuse. The second is adult exploitation. And the third is really quite a heartwarming story about how a community volunteer supported a man who was rough sleeping for quite a significant amount of time and who had refused support from us. We're pleased to say that the volunteer has been nominated for a Pride of Bracknell Award, and that they have also been put forward to the Chief Superintendent for a meet and greet to recognise all the efforts that they went through. And the final slide from me before we go over to questions is really just a wrap up of the last 12 months' key achievements. We've covered most of those already in the presentation, but there's two that I haven't covered, which are very recent. The first is the ASB pledge, the ASB Help Pledge, and we have just heard within the last week or so that we have been granted the ASB Help Pledge for the support that we offer to victims of antisocial behaviour. It's taken probably about 18 months of work to make sure that we meet the over 50 criteria that are required for us to get the pledge. So it's been a lot of work that's been done by our antisocial behaviour lead-in team, and we are going to be organising a presentation and some publicity around that soon. The second area I just wanted to highlight was the final bullet point. The Youth Justice Board for England and Wales oversees all the youth justice services within England and Wales. And in August, we were advised that we had been promoted to Quadrant 1, which is the highest quadrant in the framework due to our strong performance in preventing reoffending and also preventing children from entering the criminal justice system initially. So I think that's all from us, and we now invite questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very useful. I had a whole series of questions, and actually you've answered many of them as we went down. So, but I've got a few more off the back of what you've said. The first thing is that the data you're presenting, obviously in some cases it's a correlation with previous years, or the previous year. Also, some of the numbers are quite small, so you get a enhanced percentage deviation. Is there a better way to show trends, recognising that actually a relation back to the previous year can sometimes throw up those enormous plus or minus figures? So that was the first one on data. The second question is around your community tension dashboard, and I'm encouraged that you have started using dashboards to help you make decisions. Clearly there's a whole set of data that sits behind this. How integrated with artificial intelligence is it? And the algorithm, if there is one, using an algorithm to help you identify trends, and how do you remove bias from any of the data or the deductions that come from it? So if we can start with those two, if you wouldn't mind.
So in relation to the data, we tried to, obviously we want to show a comparison between last year because we want it to be current and meaningful. I think you're right. I think we could go away and look at, for future times, presenting it in a different way. I guess we've just got to make sure that it's current and it's relevant, and we can draw enough comparisons for it and give, as I think I tried to do with maybe like the knife-enabled offences, to give a real narrative about what it's really about. And I think if we look too much at comparisons year on year, we don't delve into the real detail. And I know in previous presentations, when we've done that, we've been told actually we just want more current and relevant and a little bit more context around it so we can get a real picture of what it's like. So it's probably something we could go away and look at together and come up with a bit of a balance of the two, maybe. So it's, the comparison's good, but it's actually a really useful narrative as well.
If I could just add to that, I think one of the graphs that we showed quite early on in the presentation, which had a longer term view, I think it was a 3-year view, that might be a better way to depict it, because you can see a longer term trend and you're not just comparing with a few months, compared to the previous year. It's more a longer term view. So that, I think, might be a better indicator of trends. We can look at that. In terms of the second question, I'm not sure how much help I'm going to be with answering that, because I'm not very clued up on algorithms and AI. But I have the dashboard in front of me, and I can see that we look at rating all the sources of information as low, moderate and high. And the low one is where there's no concerning trends or recent incidents. Moderate is where there's a concerning trend or recent incident which requires awareness and potential action. And then high is a very concerning trend or recent incidents requiring urgent action. So it seems quite a simplistic way that we are working through it. But I can go away and find out from our very clever lady that puts it all together whether there are any algorithms or bias involved with that. But it does feel like quite a simplistic analysis across all those areas of what we're seeing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Penfold.
Alison, could I just ask you to repeat that for those online because they wouldn't have heard the question? So thanks.
So the question was the children that are supported through Act Now, and I think I've gotten this right, Councillor Penfold, but it's that they aren't then excluded from going through the criminal justice system until they've completed a programme. Not in this case. So I know what you're referring to, and that's the youth diversion programme, which is exactly that. If the child admits that they've done something wrong, then they will go away under that programme and do a piece of work, and then they will not be seen as a first-time entrant. Act Now, though, isn't like that. They'll still go through the criminal justice system as normal, but they will have that intervention to prevent any further reoffending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you. My question is about the reporting tool that we were encouraged to use by our local PCSO. Councillor Presland and I are in Great Hollands Ward, and we found it quite useful, and we wondered how much use that is to you, and is that indicating the fact that there's increased cases being reported? That's how you get new information. So is it a useful tool, basically?
I might need to ask a bit more about the reporting tool.
Yeah, it's a tool that we were given. It's an online tool, and we can actually input data. We can encourage our residents to do it. So if they see something going on, like drugs or antisocial behaviour, they can access this tool, and they can input where the incident took place, when, and so going. So and you can actually look at it and see hotspots as well. So do you know anything about that?
It sounds a bit like the online reporting form for
Yes,
Thames
that's-
Valley
yeah,
Police. Is
yeah.
that what it is?
I think it is, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what you're referring to is just when you report crime or intelligence online rather than calling it in.
Right, yes it is, but it was more like a dashboard when I looked at it, because you could actually see data from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you go on to police.uk, so you
Yes,
can use it to report data, but it's really useful because you can put your local postcode in and you can
Yes.
actually get to see
Yeah.
all the crime in your local area as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's useful twofold really, because you get a really good idea of what's going on in the area, and so it keeps yourself or residents really well informed, but also there's the reporting section as well,
Yes.
which then comes straight into our reporting and is included in all our figures. So yeah.
Okay, and I've got a second question. No, it was on already. A second question. It's going back to the town centre and increased crime. And I have noted when I've been in there, lots of cyclists going around and everything. Have you upped the amount of police going into the town at particular times when you think it's busy, or have you increased it overall to sort of try and keep the crime down there?
So we have got a dedicated neighbourhood team within the town centre. It is quite a small team, but it's probably comparable to the amount of offences that we do get in Bracknell. We also have a new team of an additional sergeant and 9 which are based in Slough. But because we're now a LCU-wide police area, so I used to just have Slough, now I've got Slough, Bracknell, Windsor and Maidenhead, so we kind of come under one big command unit. I'm able to move those resources around to respond. So if we get a particular spike in crime in the town centre, or, you know, we can pull together those resources in to run a particular operation, and that's when you might see high increases. We also had the summer initiative in the town centre, and we've got a winter initiative as well to increase patrols, and our neighbourhood teams actually now have apps on their phone, so they can monitor they log their patrol hours, and I'm able to directly see a report to see how many hours of patrol they've done every day within certain hotspot areas. So it's a really good way of us actually monitoring and make sure there's those increased patrols as well.
Thank you, that's great.
We have a question online from Councillor Eggleston. Caroline, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It's good to hear that overall crime has come down, but in the areas such as North Bracknell, where numbers have gone up from 202 reported in September 24 to 215 in September 25, with 85 of those being violent and sexual offences compared to 77 last year, what extra resources are being put in place to ensure they don't continue to rise in some areas? Thank you.
So, as you can see, I've talked a little bit about the sexual offending and some of the knife-enabled, so the more serious offending. So you will have, obviously at Bracknell, you've got your response teams who respond to the actual incidents themselves. We also have our neighbourhood teams who will pull together specific operations in a certain area. So if you see a particular crime series or a spike in a certain area, we've got the availability to move resources around to run bespoke operations depending on the crime type and what that crime series might look like. We also have other resources available to support us. So Bracknell has its own tasking team, which is a team of mainly plainclothes officers, and they usually do covert operations, but they do some overt police work as well, targeting crime series. So we've got additional resources like that locally that we can tap into and move to areas should we need it. That's overseen by something called our TTCG, which is our kind of like a tasking group, which is always chaired by myself or one of the other senior leaders. And we look at different patterns and crime trends and make sure that we're really on top of some of those emergent series to tackle them before they become bigger issues.
Thank you.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are you satisfied about the rate of solving crimes?
So we'll never be satisfied because we're always trying to get better at everything we do. You'll sort of see with some of those outcome rates that depending on the crime type, you might have a very, very different outcome rate. So for example, our shoplifting, we've got an incredible outcome rate. It's significantly higher than any other crime type, and obviously that's because it's a lot easier to solve, because usually when it's reported you've got CCTV, you've got a victim that's engaging, and you've got a suspect you can easily identify. So there's some crime types that obviously you'll get a much better outcome rate, and then you'll have crime types like domestic violence, by the very nature of it, is a really, really challenging crime type to try and get positive outcomes, just because of the very nature of it, the impact on the victims, the willingness to support, gathering the evidence. So it depending on your crime type, you're going to have very different outcome rates. As a force, and certainly as a local area, our two biggest priorities are improving our attendance rates to our grade 1 and grade 2, so getting to jobs quickly. The other priority is increasing our outcome rates through a series of work around better victim engagement, better crime investigations, more timely crime investigations, just to improve those outcome rates. So if the question was, am I happy? I'll say I'm never happy until, because it's always going to be improving.
Thank you. A supplementary. How has the delay in court proceedings to hear crimes impacted your force?
So I guess not specific to Bracknell, but of just the question of wider, I think that there are, as we know, significant delays in getting cases to court. And one of the most, I guess, obvious issues, I would say, with that is losing victim engagement. Because if you lose your victim, there's only a very small amount of cases where the CPS would be willing to continue in a victimless prosecution. So it's very rare that you would continue. So cases may be lost because of victim disengagement, and it makes it a lot more challenging for police to continue with that victim engagement until such time it goes to court. So that would be one of my observations, I guess.
Councillor Hafferty.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones. First one, bicycle theft. I noticed we've now moved into with the second worst in the area. I was just wondering how bad that actually is, and if there's any patterns relating to that. The second question is relating to the Escape the Trap facilitator training. If you've got any more info about what the rollout of that looks like, and is there likely to be an online version of that for people that can't perhaps physically go to courses? Thanks.
So if I take the bicycle theft first, it's something that actually Alice and I both picked up on and had a bit of a discussion about it, because I think neither of us were particularly cited on why we'd had such a change. So I looked at the rolling 12-month data. So from 23 to 24, we had 112 bicycle offences, 23 to 24, 137, and 24 to 25, only 109. So actually what our data shows is we've had a reduction in bicycle thefts, therefore suggesting that maybe some of those areas have had a bigger reduction in order that we should be going up, if that makes sense. That's the only sort of pattern we can attribute. So although we're going down, so nearly 30 offences less than the previous year, we can't really attribute any other pattern to that. I know in comparison to other areas, Bracknell, in comparison to Thames Valley areas, Bracknell is very low. So if we look at somewhere like colleagues in Oxford, they have 10 times the amount of offences we do. So Oxford have over 1,000 per year compared to Bracknell having only 100. So relatively low numbers compared to some other areas and reducing. But to answer it, we'd probably have to look at our other most similar groups and look at how they've had that bigger reduction and what that might look like.
Continuing on the bicycle thefts, do you get groups coming into the area from outside at various times, thieving, say, bicycles or perhaps some other item?
So in relation to bicycle thefts, I'm not exactly sure, because actually a lot of our reports, they're really hard to solve. So bicycles tend to be reported late, so they're never seen, so they're never reported at the time. So you very rarely would get like a 999 call for a bike being stolen. It'll be at the end of the day when the commuters come back from London and their bike's gone. So you've got a big time frame that you're looking at, and there might be in areas where there is no CCTV and no witnesses. So you tend to have an unwitnessed crime where there's no CCTV and a very large time frame. So it makes it really challenging to understand what that pattern is.
Right, thank you.
Just to answer your question about Escape the Trap, we do have some promotional material which we can share, which will have a bit more information than what I've got with me this evening. Because it's an 8-week group programme, I'm not quite sure whether the format of it is going to be in person, face-to-face, or whether it's going to be online. So I would need to check that. I think we would need to look at the needs of the children and the young adults being referred through, and seeing what would be most suitable. I know that online is a very popular way of doing group programs these days. So I'll look into that and find out whether that's an option, and I can share that out. No worries.
Just on Escape the Trap, I've clicked the link. I noticed that the last update on the news they had in there was 2022. Just for, if you can feed back through whatever channels, it would feel like it maybe be updated.
I'll have a look at that. Thanks for picking that up. We've only just launched it in Bracknell Forest, so I'm wondering whether it's not the national or the host site, but I will have a closer look at that.
it's just a credibility thing if someone's going to that
Course,
site and it
yeah.
says it's 22.
Yes,
That would be a good thing.
agreed. Thank you.
Okay, I have one very last question for you, and it may be too early. Obviously, police and crime commissioners are soon to be a relic of our past. Have you started thinking about how you're going to address what comes next as a partnership?
So yes, the OPPC will be disbanded in 2028. At the moment, we're still awaiting further guidance and clarification as to what will happen where places don't have mayoral strategic authorities. So where there is a mayoral strategic authority, that function will move to the mayor, likely to be delegated to the deputy mayor. However, where there is not, and it's a group of local authorities, as is with the Thames Valley, whilst there are conversations at the moment around establishing a strategic authority, what at the moment we're reliant on is government providing more clarity on how they refer to a leaders group being established. We need to have some more clarity as to exactly what government's guidance is around that before we start formalising plans. What I would assure the Commission on, though, is that particularly through the MSA conversations that we're having across the Thames Valley, there is a work stream that looks at public service reform, and this will form part of that. So it's still very early days, but there is a structure and a way in which we will be able to address it.
Thank you.
Can I just add something? We depend as a CSP quite heavily on funding that comes through from the OPCC. It's called the Partnerships Fund. What they have confirmed is that that funding will still run its course. It started in 25-26 and will end on the 31st of March 28, which is just before they will be disbanded. So we have been reassured that that funding will still be coming to local authorities for that period.
Thank you very much. Any final questions? No. We will now move into debate. First of all, would anyone like to speak? Okay. With that in mind, thank you for attending. I now declare the meeting of the Crime and Disorder Committee closed. Thank you. Just for those who are watching, we are now closing the meeting of the Crime and Disorder Committee, and representatives from the police and the partnership are now leaving, and we are now going to reconvene the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission with Councillor Gilby, Cabinet Member, on his update on his portfolio, planning, transport and countryside. Councillor Gilby, welcome to the Commission. I do believe you have a presentation that you have for us, correct?
Do indeed.
Marvellous. Would you like to commence your presentation?
Well, before we start the presentation, I'd first like to say thank you for inviting me to come before the Commission tonight. The work of the Commission is very valuable in holding Cabinet members like myself to account, and I'm grateful for the opportunity not just to talk about the work that has taken place in my portfolio, but to answer any and all questions that you may have at the end of it. One thing I will say in addition to the presentation, is one thing that myself and my colleagues benefit from is a talented and professional team of officers that are able to make the details on these things happen. And I want to pay tribute to everyone who's involved in the sort of plans that I'm going to be talking about in this presentation today. So that being the case, you'll hear the phrase next slide an awful lot. Please do consider playing a game of bingo to see when I say it. But I will start by saying, oh, Jamie's already ahead of me. So members, you'll recall that we went through the local transport plan process. I intend as little as possible to speak to the presentation. You can read it yourself, but I would remind everyone that the local transport plan was important, not just in the fact that, as with previous plans, we were looking at current travel patterns and attempting to plan around those, but critically, this was the first plan where we were trying to put our own aspirations forward in terms of what we want travel in Bracknell Forest to look like. It was a long process, thoroughly reviewed, and I'm very proud of the plan that we've come up with. And of course you can see from the presentation there some of the key themes that we've arrived at as part of this plan. Next slide, please. Now, I'll allow you to read that at your leisure, but I will highlight a couple of points in particular. One thing I'd like to note is the fact that we're seeking powers to introduce a lane rental scheme to reduce periods of disruption by utility roadworks. And I would like to state very clearly that we are cognizant of the impact that roadworks can have on residents and businesses. I think for those who are not as intimately involved, I think it's important to give a sort of flavour as to why roadworks can be so problematic, not just in terms of the obvious, the impact they have, but in terms of managing them. Obviously, roadworks come from a variety of sources. It's not just work that we as a highway authority do, but quite often it comes from utility companies. Now, as things stand, councils have little recourse, very few reasons to refuse a permit request by a utility company to carry out work, and I think that's very important to emphasise. We clearly do have a power to try and timetable these roadworks as best as we can, but when you quite literally get in thousands of requests in the course of a year, all the timetable management in the world will do little if councils have very little power to refuse a permit in the first place. So that's why I appreciate that to residents it does feel like, and in reality is the case, that one utility company can work on one bit of a road and then it feels like not so long after there's another utility company working on another or perhaps the same bit of road. But what I am encouraged by is the moves by government to look at powers that local councils can have to better control how utility companies are working together when conducting roadworks. And in this case, what we're seeking to do is get powers for a scheme that will allow us to charge up to £2,500 per day for works on the busiest roads at the busiest times. It is a complicated procedure. Only 4 authorities in the country have such a scheme at present, but nevertheless the fact that we are pursuing this is a sign of our ambition to ease the burden that roadworks have on our community, and I appreciate and acknowledge that in some areas it can be quite significant. Next slide, please. Some good news that I can report is that we are working on establishing habitat banks, which is a very fancy way of saying that it's a bit of land that we've identified in the borough where we can increase the biodiversity. Now, I'm looking at the members in front of me. A lot of you, I believe, are on the planning committee, so you're probably quite familiar with the concept of biodiversity net gain. This idea that for developments of a certain size, you have to be able to increase the biodiversity 10% beyond what was there previously. Now, obviously, in areas which are being built on, it's harder to achieve biodiversity in that area. So you are allowed to look at increasing biodiversity in areas outside where the development is happening. Now, one thing that we benefit from here in Bracknell Forest, of course, is a lot of potential areas that can be used as habitat banks. We are quite privileged in this respect. There are authorities such as Reading, for example, which will have a harder time identifying habitat banks. Well, by using our natural advantages, we potentially are going to be able to attract biodiversity net gain, not just from developments in this borough, but from boroughs that surround us, which overall will massively aid the state of biodiversity in our borough. We all agree that part of what makes Bracknell Forest special is its green areas, and I really do believe that biodiversity net gain allows us a way to increase that to new levels. Next slide, please. So you'll see here a variety of other ancillary points about the work that planning is undertaking. You'll obviously be intrigued, I'm sure, by talk of a new local plan. I think it's important, obviously, to be clear about the wording there. We obviously have a current local plan in place, but obviously since that was approved, we are in receipt, of course, of new numbers from central government. But it is an ongoing prospect, because right now I would expertly describe the scene before us as foggy, murky. Details are yet to be filled in until the new planning and infrastructure bill is passed. Nevertheless, we are ready to move on this when details are clearer. It, of course, will be a complicated process, and I'm absolutely sure I will hear from each and every one of you, as you should, to tell me your views on the local plan process. I suspect Councillor Barnard and I will become very good friends from the correspondence that I will receive from him. But it is something that we are attentive to and are cognizant of. We are also in process of doing a new parking standards supplementary planning document, which supplements the existing policy with the local plan. And I'm grateful for everyone who will take part and has been taking part as part of that consultation process. Next slide, please. Now, a personal highlight of mine, they're all highlights within this slide, but a personal highlight of mine is the bridge being replaced at Shepherd Meadows. That has been a long-running process. I see Councillor Forster at the end nodding furiously. It has been beset by challenges. There were, of course, a number of different partners involved, and when there are a number of different partners, the opportunities for obstacles increases. But nevertheless, I pay tribute to the team that has worked so hard to ensure that we didn't give up and have been able to reach the successful point where all partners were brought on board and the bridge happily opened. And you can see on the slide more of the sorts of things that the Parks and Countryside team have been getting up to. In fact, if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see a flavour more. I think we can take that as read, really. I'm sure you've all had a chance to review that. So if we go to the next slide, which covers building control. Building control, for those of you who were at the last, were there at the last time I was before the Commission, will recall that building control has clearly been through some challenges, and it's important for me to emphasise that those are not challenges that are somehow specific to Bracknell Forest alone. The national picture of building control has been a challenging one. Quite simply, there are not nearly enough people qualified to take up these roles as there is the demand from local councils. Nevertheless, despite all that, we have been working hard to make Bracknell Forest Council an attractive offer to would-be building control officers. We've successfully recruited a new head of service. We've successfully recruited a new principal registered building inspector. We are in the midst of further recruitment, and we have been working hard on our recent audit, or should I say a recent audit that we received, to implement the recommendations that were laid out. It was quite it was encouraging to see how well the new team has responded to the increased recruitment, how well they've taken up the challenge of the audit, and how well they've responded to it through a very detailed action plan. And I certainly feel that whilst we have still challenges ahead of us, for example, putting in a new IT system, which is always an enterprise, I am quite confident that the team, as is responding well to the challenges that are ahead of them. If you go on to the next slide, please. I invite you to read some detail on what the audit pointed out. As I said, there has been a full response to the audit, and that included the detailed action plan that I alluded to. These were not points that we were oblivious to. These are points that we were aware of, that we were working hard to address. Again, I emphasise really a lot of this is the systemic problems within building control industry. But as I say, we've responded and really risen to the challenge. Next slide, please. Parking management and enforcement continues to be a sort of ever-evolving sphere of action. I'm very proud that we've, of course, installed fencing in the Avenue car park. That was certainly one of the earliest actions that I can recall we were asked to consider as an administration, and it is a positive step. It is, of course, not the only step, but to be able to do things like that show that we are taking this matter seriously. We continue in our programme for surface car parks, and we are looking at a parking supply and demand strategy on the long-term town centre parking. And we continue to have an encouraging success rate when it comes to, or should I say our contractors have an encouraging success rate when it comes to appeals against penalty charge notices. It is important that there is a good rate because it inspires confidence that NSL are applying parking charge notices fairly and with all due vigour. Next slide, please. Now, you'll see from the table there that whilst there is variability from month to month, we are issuing more parking charge notices across the board now than we were back in 22 to 23. Now, one might say, is that a bad sign? I think councillors will agree. It is not because parking itself has become more problematic. Indeed, councillors are always contacting me to highlight a particular site where there might be an issue. But what I do believe it shows is that we are having a much more effective strategy in highlighting and targeting the areas where there are problems, responding to the concerns that we hear from residents and councillors. And I believe the higher number of parking charge notices is a testament to that identification and hard work. And likewise, you'll see on the table on school idling and driver interaction that interaction with drivers has been positive on 2 key metrics: complying with requests and fewer drivers refusing to interact. I would say that we are clearly a long way from a perfect solution. There will clearly going to be a need for NSL patrols for time to come, but these sort of numbers demonstrate that we continue to take this matter very seriously. Thank you. I, of course, am up for any and all questions.
We have some questions. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my question is, you focused a fair bit on that, on parking enforcement. How about planning enforcement? Because particularly in the more rural areas, you know, there's a sense that is actually quite important from trying to, you know, should we say, regulise situations which can get a little bit out of hand. So just where we are on that, because, I mean, you'll know from other forums that there have been some frustrations raised about how we're able to actually address that. You know, it's separate and different from building control, but really interested in the sort of planning enforcement side of things there.
Well, shall I take each in turn, Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you. It is important to emphasise that, of course, we do take planning enforcement seriously. I hope that there wasn't an inference there that we don't take the charge seriously. In fact, within the presentation, we are currently dealing with 127 enforcement cases. I think it is important as a matter of record to emphasise that planning enforcement, not all of it is the form of a hammer approach. We find that the best way to get resolution is through talking with the developers, not going for the hammer first approach. And I appreciate that's not what you were targeting in your question, but it is just to emphasise the point that planning enforcement can take a number of spheres, and if we look only at the hammer first approach, it doesn't give the full totality of the work that the team is doing. I do recognise, of course, that, and I've said this publicly, that we do have a dedicated but focused team of 2.5 people, and that half the people is very important, that are dealing with enforcement cases within planning. It does, of course, mean that sometimes we're not able to operate quite with the speed that we would want to. I am here to be frank and honest, but what I can assure is that the team is dedicated and they do have their fair share of enforcement cases that they are taking very seriously.
Councillor Barnard, do you want to
Yeah,
your second?
just to be clear, I think there's an issue of perception round here, and I think, I'd use the case that was brought to my attention not long ago, about the sort of chainsaws being heard, at sort of 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. On the positive side, on that occasion, the planning enforcement team responded, but a not dissimilar case later on sort of dragged on a little bit. And I think what it's saying is that enforcement is probably the last line in our attack on this. It's sort of trying to be as aware as possible upstream of the sort of potential risks and threats. And I think that's where, sort of my question is, how can we do more to sort of harness local intelligence, maybe from the parishes and town council, as to sites which they know might be a little bit more at risk? Because there was one a number of years ago in Aldsmore Lane where, a developer went in and cleared all the trees very successfully. We got everything replanted and that site is still now growing back again. But it's in those situations where if we can avoid, long-term irreplaceable trees being cut down, that would be helpful. And I think, what concerns me is that if you look at the up-and-coming planning infrastructure bill and then you look at the local plan, if that means more housing has to be built, there are in some parts of the borough more temptation to actually, should we say, facilitate that development. So it's being, on top of those sort of dynamics and what is a fairly small and tight resource. Given the finances facing the council going forward, that's going to be a challenging thing to increase. So I think that, hopefully that puts it in a little more context.
If I may, I think you pick up on an important point as well, which is that intelligence gathering. I think also, and you infer this point, which I accept, it's not just residents feeling confidence in reporting what they see, but also parish councils parish councils feeling confident in what they report will also be taken on board as well. And I think the fairest thing for me to say is that's an ongoing process. I want to develop that relationship with parish councils further, and I sincerely have tried to do so. We've had, for example, a forum where all parish chairs at the parish councils came together to discuss common issues. I've sat down with each parish council now at least once to discuss their planning concerns, but I accept and would not suggest that the work is done, and I want to keep furthering that, and I would certainly welcome any specific suggestions on how that can be bettered. Thank you.
Councillor Eggleston has a question online, I believe. Caroline?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Gilby, for your presentation. I'm going back to parking enforcement. We recently had a situation where the buses couldn't get through just past the police station due to bad parking. How is this going to be dealt with in the long term, please? So,
just to be clear, because it depends on the type of parking we're talking about here, but I suppose in broad terms, what I would say is that when we get intelligence, not just from residents but bus operators, that they are unable. So presumably this bus could not get into the bus stop because of the way things were parked, or could the bus not get through the road because of parking?
So you've got two situations there. It's really for disabled parking. So when you go past, it's by the ring. So when you sort of walk past, if you're coming through from where the library is to catch the bus. So you had a situation where people are using the disabled parking bays and then not disabled people. But also they do a lot of pickups and drop-offs there. And the buses just couldn't get through and had to cancel the service, which of course left people with disabilities who then had to try and walk back to the bus station. So we know it's happened, so I just want to know how we're going to ensure it doesn't happen again, please.
Right, okay, so I'll answer generally and then make a point on the specific areas. So what I would emphasise is in areas where you feel that there is, any instance, is obviously worth reporting, but clearly areas where there's habitual use of disabled parking bays by people who do not have a blue badge, please ensure that the council is aware of that. We can only act with the intelligence that we receive. Although we do have enforcement patrols, we rely as well on intelligence. So where you see instances of disabled parking bays being used by people who should not be there, I encourage you to make sure that you report it into the council. And in answer to your question, Councillor Eggleston, when we have that intelligence, not just from patrols, but from the intelligence we receive from residents, councillors, and then we know it's a particular hotspot, we will of course see if we need to adjust the enforcement patrol strategy, which I know some councillors around here will, having had correspondence with me, will acknowledge has happened. On the point about routes in general being blocked by bad parking, it wouldn't surprise me, because I have regular dealings with the bus operators, that they have also passed that along. And what we try and do is look at the array of options that are available to us, whether that's if there are no traffic restrictions in place already, putting in traffic restrictions. If there are traffic restrictions in place, greater enforcement. But what I would say, Councillor Eggleston, is on the specific areas you've raised, whilst on the disabled parking bay, I would make sure that that's reported in, if not already. On the bus route, please do flag that to me. It may be the bus operator has already flagged it in, but I'm happy to pick that up offline as well.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Penfold.
Regarding land that's owned by Abri, does the enforcement have power to enforce on their land where people are parking in dangerous places, such as corners and exits to roads? So can Abri apply to enforcement for help to enforce safer parking in those areas? And other housing associations, of course.
What I would do is I would not want to give incorrect guidance. I would ask the Executive Director to confirm this, please.
So where there are parking restrictions, so double yellow lines, etc., that's where they'll be able to be enforced. If they're just inappropriately parking on areas that don't have those restrictions, then enforcement won't be able to issue any tickets. So I think if you've got specific locations where there is a particular issue and you want to see double yellow lines as an example put in place, that would be the mechanism for doing that. The issue I suspect you will find is those localities where parking is at an absolute premium. You won't get much support for the double yellow lines going in when you do the consultation on it, but it's still, you could test it if you needed to.
Right, thank you. Our second question is regarding surfacing of car parks. Now, Bracknell Forest is responsible for surfacing the ones that it runs. There's a few car parks that belong to schools and they share them with community centres. The schools, I think, don't they get their funding per head? Does that include an amount of money for doing things like that? Or is it part of the general sort of maintenance of trees and grass and that sort of thing?
The answer, as I understand it, is no, but this is a funding question which I couldn't possibly, so I'm going to refer to the Executive Director again, not that I'm trying to do that very often.
I think we would need to know the location you're talking about and whether it's council-owned, school-owned, community-owned. So it,
community don't contribute to it, but it's actually got rust on the exit.
Again, it will depend upon whether it's a maintained school or whether it's through. If you want to give us the specifics of that location, then we can look at it. But I suspect it's unlikely that it's something that we would normally fund. Yeah, come to me on that one and I'll pick it up.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Penfold. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Councillor Gilby. I have two questions. The first relates specifically to Warfield, Whitegrove. You very kindly visited and saw the parking problems that are associated with school pickup and drop-off times at Whitegrove School. Are you able to provide me with a breakdown of the school idling and driver interaction statistics specifically relating to Whitegrove School? Because I think it's quite important to demonstrate to the residents who suffer the misery of thoughtless and antisocial parking to understand what we're actually doing to tackle it, and any data you've got to support that would be very helpful. So that's my first question.
Just on that one, that seems entirely sensible to possible to be broken down for all schools. That would be a possibility. So I'm just refining a very good question.
Thank you. So yes, if you could have that data, that would be really, really helpful. The second question is slightly more esoteric, in as much as knowing how long it takes to formulate and deliver a local plan, are we in a position to be clear about what the impact of a strategic mayor for this area will have on the development of our next local plan?
On the first question, yes, we are quite happy to provide that data. I can say this from personal experience as well. Of course, as well as being a cabinet member, I'm a ward councillor, and I have my own interest as well in my own area in seeing the effectiveness of measures that we take. So that data will be prepared. I can't give a time frame as yet, but I will come back to the commission members, and give you a time frame of how long it will take for that data to be prepared. The second question is the powers of the strategic mayor or strategic mayor authority. Now, the authority, as I know, will have spatial planning powers, which is a very fancy way of saying planning powers over a wide area to encourage this idea of regional planning plans. I'm sure that's not the technical term, but it's to look at the holistic area. In terms of how it currently looks like it will work alongside our local plan process, I mentioned earlier that we have an outline as to the direction of travel, but everything is so dependent on this planning and infrastructure bill going through. Although the planning infrastructure bill, as I understand it, doesn't devote an awful lot to the strategic mayor authority powers on spatial planning, it is still pretty impossible to talk about how it will work alongside the powers of the strategic mayor authority until we know what the final bill will say. So the very short answer to that long-winded explanation is, I'm afraid we really won't know until the bill is signed off and we understand the implications on us as a local authority, and then from there we can work out how that might work alongside a strategic authority that has spatial planning powers.
Councillor Preston.
Hi. Just wanted to ask, so in lots of areas now we're finding that, especially on Ringmead, that people, because they can't park in their streets around Great Hollands in particular, they're now parking on Ringmead, and they are churning up the grass. Is there anything we can do to enforce, stop it, because they're going to just wreck the green spaces that we have, and obviously it's just going to make the area look absolutely dreadful. So yeah.
It is exceptionally tricky. It is exceptionally tricky. I mean, for one thing, knowing Great Hollands, a lot of those green verges wouldn't be our land anyway. They'd be Abry land. So there's, yes, I'm just saying in general that, in cases where cars are parked up on Abry land, it is entirely within the purview of Abry to enforce against that. And sometimes they do by putting up wooden posts, which obviously doesn't entirely solve the parking problem that's down the street. In terms of what we can do, the reality is, it is tricky to enforce against this, if I'm being entirely frank. Although it is our land, it's one thing for us to be in ownership of the land, but the powers that are available to us are quite limited. It's in the same way as how I did an open letter about pavement parking. The powers that are available to us as a council are quite limited in this respect. I don't know if the Executive Director wanted to add anything beyond that.
Nothing more than what I said already about, double yellow lines. I think the issue that you've got there is that, as I said previously, parking's at a premium, isn't it? And people are trying to find locations to park when they can't get into the spaces in and around the streets. Perhaps something just to take away and talk to our environmental services colleagues about, as to whether there is anything further that could be done. But at the moment, there's not any obvious and quick solutions.
Thank you.
I should use it as an opportunity, in fact, to talk about a related field, if I may, with the Chair's indulgence, and that is exactly what councils can do around things like pavement parking. Clearly, I get a lot of complaints from residents about people parking on pavements, and to be very clear about what the powers are available to us as a council. Clearly, where there are traffic restrictions in place, as the Executive Director has said, we can take action. These are traffic restrictions we've put in place. We can enforce against people parking against them. Where there are no traffic restrictions in place, quite frankly, councils in law do not have the power to enforce against pavement parking. Some areas in the country do. London has the power. Scotland was given the power by its devolved institutions, but not the rest of England. And what this means is in those cases where pavement parking is happening, and clearly I'm really focusing on complete obstruction, mobility, scooters can't get through, prams can't get through, you have to approach Thames Valley Police about that, and don't accept no for an answer is my advice. They're the ones that have the power and law to be able to tackle this more clearly. Even in cases where dropped curb is obstructed, the best thing we can do is issue a fine. Only the police has the enforcement power to go to the door and say that that car should be removed. But clearly the implicit problem, and I had this said to me in response to my letter by the Police and Crime Commissioner, is the Police and Crime Commissioner can say to the birds come home that why don't you just put yellow lines in? Well, I'm sure our councillors who represent wards where parking is already at a premium will accept that just going to a ward, say in Hanworth, and putting double yellow lines all over it is not really a sustainable solution. The solution to pavement parking is not to stop parking at all from happening on that road. So I will say as a matter of record that I hope the police in my subsequent meeting in January will be more encouraging in their response than they have been so far.
Thank you. Councillor Hafferty.
Thank you. So I guess we know that embedded carbon and emissions in developments, and new developments especially, is massive. To really welcome your sustainable construction guidance that you're looking at. Are you able to give us a bit more information about what that will look like and when it's likely to come out, especially in respect of the new developments that are going on, especially in the town centre, for instance? And what methods will we have to be able to persuade developers to follow this guidance? Thanks.
Time frame, I'll have to refer to the Executive Director. Do we have an updated time frame on that? And anything you want to add to the powers as well?
In terms of time frame, I know that's being worked on at the moment. I'll come back to the Commission with a specific time frame when it's going to be published. It will be guidance, so we will be using it in an advisory capacity with developers. So trying to use our best endeavours to use that to get the best type of form of development that we can. But it won't be a formal supplementary planning document because it's linked to policies, but it isn't a direct elaboration of them in the same way that some of the other policy documents are. But we will be using that in our discussions with them through our pre-application process and then when planning applications are received.
Would there be anything we could do to kind of try and have that more enforceable? Maybe would it be have potential to put it into the local plan somewhere, the new version of the local plan, something like that?
One benefit of the local plan being revised is we can certainly look at putting in some policy prescriptions that didn't work first time round, for example, or additional things that have arisen since the local plan process started in, when would it have been? 2016, I think. So the short answer in general terms is we can look at the local plan revision process as a chance to amend or include extra language on these things. I couldn't commit, obviously, to a specific policy proposal at this stage without going through all the details. But in general terms, yes, the local plan revision process is a chance to be able to look at how we strengthen some of those provisions. And then from that, it provides the policy hooks that we can use to develop subsequently into not just team guidance, but perhaps supplementary planning documents as well.
Thank you all. No more questions I see. So it's now a chance to move into debate. Is there anyone that would like to speak? No. So with that, I'll bring that to a close. Thank you very much, Councillor Gilby, for attending.
Thank you.
For your enthusiasm for your parking endeavours. We'll now move on to agenda item 9, which is the council plan overview. I welcome the Chief Executive back to the desk at the end to present the council plan overview report. I hope you're all powered up.
I'm all powered up now, Chair. Apologies for that.
Thank you. Would you like to present your report on the council plan overview?
Thank you. Yes, and this overview report reflects what the council has delivered during the summer months. So I know it feels a bit strange in December, entering into the winter, talking about all the great things that we did do during the summer that we had. However, there was a lot that went on, and actually the first bullet point in the overarching report, the covering report, is actually on the agenda tonight as well. One of the big achievements that we delivered in partnership with other organisations is that we co-produced with over 2,300 responses from residents the community strategy, which is currently out for consultation. It was probably the biggest co-production approach that we've ever taken as an authority, so to get that level of feedback has been brilliant. I'll also just pull out a few other really successful wins that we've been able to deliver during that quarter, one of which was, for example, the delivery of new places for special provision within Edgeborough School, Hawthorne Academy, which is now operating, which is a social, emotional and mental health school, increasing our local capacity and also increasing our capacity for children with autism. So they're positive news stories for our special educational needs and disability priority. We also opened Bridgewell, which is supported accommodation, and I'm pleased to say is now all of our residents have moved in, which again is a brilliant design, purposely built with all mod cons, and is operating as we had hoped. We had the topping out ceremony of Market Street, which was basically a derelict piece of land. It was one of those pieces of land in the town centre that was going to be very difficult to develop, but we've unlocked that. And we had the topping out ceremony over the summer months, and that is delivering 169 new homes within the town centre, 81 of which will be designated as affordable. So there are lots of good news stories throughout the report, but what I do just want to highlight is some of the challenges that remain. One of which was an item that the Commission spoke about with Councillor Neil at the last Commission meeting, which is the financial position of local government and the difficult headwinds that we are facing. And our in-year position during the summer was challenging, in particular with children's and adult services and the cost of the demand and costs increasing. What I would also just make reference to is the challenge that we've had in the completion of new homes, not quite meeting our trajectory, our forecasted trajectory. However, I would say that we've got over 1,000 dwellings that are under construction, so they are coming online, but it is looking quite challenging in terms of those completion rates, and that's partly buyer demand as well. So you have a lot of detail in there, so I thought I would just provide a brief overview, and then if you have any specific questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Any questions for the Chief Executive? Councillor Haffajee.
Thanks. Just a couple. Secure cycle parking. I know we've got these six lockers installed already. Kind of putting you on the spot here at the moment. It was I mentioned as part of the LTP4 consultation was that secure cycle parking was one of the issues. People weren't using their bikes as much, so it's quite good to use these. I was just wondering if you've had any idea how much their uptake has been so far. And so certainly I haven't seen much advertising about them or any notification about them yet. Are we planning to let people know about it somehow?
I don't have that level of data, but we can provide that to the Commission, absolutely. And I think it follows from the earlier Police and Crime Commission conversation around bike thefts. Whilst they've gone down overall, there's a perception that we need, it's ensuring the safety and somewhere safe to go with the bikes. Yeah.
Thank you. And my second question, I noticed in Priority Com 510 on page 30, it was talking about working with Crown Estates to explore funding opportunities. And it mentioned there was going to be a meeting in November. I just wondering if you got any update on how that... It was Amber and the RAG rating. And it just seemed to be relying on this meeting. I was just wondering if that meeting happened, if there was any updates on it.
Specifically, no, I don't have an update. I would imagine a meeting has been held because the Crown Estate are always very obliging, but I don't have a specific update on that. I haven't even scrolled to the right bit yet, but again, if you want some feedback on that, it will certainly come through in the next CPOR. But if you want it out of that process, we can do that.
Yeah, I guess it was just to know if it was still Amber or if it had been sorted out.
If it's changed, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. I have a question on, it's on page 95. Children's social care, children looked after. It's around placements. Could you just help me understand the issue there, why it's red? And also the impact that you've got 3 very expensive placements that are putting pressure on budgets. The concern obviously is if it's only 3 which are putting pressures on budgets, how much risk are we exposed to?
So again, which page was that on?
95.
95 on our pack. Oh, this is, let me just double check. This is against the savings, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So what this is showing is that we would have forecast we would be able to make a certain level of saving, but what we're showing is that is at risk, because we were forecasting, in effect, a number of children that we would be looking after. And if that varies, or if their needs become more complex, then the cost will increase. So what this is indicating is that there are 3 cases that have come into the authority where we now then have to deal with them because of their complex nature, because of the needs, and because of our requirements to make sure we provide appropriate support. That specific saving that we had agreed that the council agreed through the budget setting process is at risk of being delivered. So there's a very direct correlation between that and our ability to deliver the saving.
Councillor Barnard.
If it's helpful, there is one very good figure that relates to Bracknell Forest that compared to comparator authorities, on the basis of the family safeguarding model we have in place, we have a lower overall number of children in care or at the edge of care. So that means, actually perversely that means when we have a budget pressure, it shows more because it's against the background of a very, very well managed group of children, young people who are able to stay with their families. And I hope that will be the finding of Bracknell Forest now. But if that's helpful in context, so these one-off cases because they're demand-led, and don't forget, because we're a small unitary, a lot of these specialist placements are actually outside Bracknell Forest. But it's against the background compared to many authorities, I think, where we've actually got a very, very stable and lower than statistical average number of children in care and at the edge of care.
Any more questions for the Chief Executive? Okay. Thank you. We will now move into debate. Would anyone like to speak? Councillor Affergy.
Thank you. Yeah, it's about the secure cycle parking. So I knew that these 6 units were going to appear, but I didn't know when. And it was only when I was in town with Councillor Virgo, actually, and we just saw them. And you know, if people need to know that these are there, they have to be pre-booked, so they need to be known about in advance. So I think it'd probably be worthwhile for us to recommend for the cabinet to actually advertise these more, to let people know about them, for officers to tell people they're around. These are actually meant to be trial units. If they're successful, they'll put more in. And since we know that cycle parking is an issue, I think, or theft of cycles is an issue, as we heard earlier, we need to advertise more. So that'd be my recommendation, to do that.
Now, you don't get away with that easy. Can you rephrase it, and then I'll get Harry to read it back to you so we can get it spot on.
Okay, so I guess it would be, I'd recommend that the Cabinet ask officers to advertise the new secure cycle parking that we have.
I'm happy to support that. I think that's a recommendation. I believe it needs to be seconded, doesn't it?
Let's just read it back, make sure we got it, but we recommend them. Harry?
That the Cabinet ask officers to advertise the new secure parking that we have.
Advertise the market, yeah.
Relevant Cabinet member. Yeah. Read it one more time, Harry.
That the relevant Cabinet member ask officers to advertise and market the new secure parking that we have.
Do I have a seconder, Councillor Barnard?
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's vote on that. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Any more recommendations? Right. Thank you. In that case, that brings us to the end. Thank you to the Chief Executive. Let's move on to item 10, which is again the Chief Executive. Sue, would you like to present?
Thank you very much, and sincere apologies from Catalin Bogos, who has been very much integral to leading this piece of work. He has unfortunately been is unable to attend due to personal reasons. So he sends his apologies, and he sent me instead. So I will say, if there are some very detailed questions, I will definitely take those away for you. However, I am hopeful that in my intro to the CPOR report as well, this is something that you will be aware of. The community strategy, as I've said previously, has been out to has gone through this extensive co-production approach. With a wide range of engagement activities over the summer and autumn, where we engaged with residents to look at producing this 10-year community strategy. The council worked with over 15 organisations through the co-production process, looking at how we can develop the borough in terms of its stronger community, more connected and cohesive communities, both now and in the future. Through that co-production approach, it has developed the strategy as you see it, as has been published, and it's now out for consultation for residents to provide their their views, to ensure that how we have captured all of that information through that engagement process and the co-production process, and ensure it's all reflected in the draft vision, aims and objectives. Through the consultation process, we're also then just checking if there's anything else that needs to be considered and thought of across all of the organisations that have been part of the process, and of course for the Borough Council, so that we can capture the clear actions that we need to take forward, so that this isn't just a strategy document. Actually, there's some very clear deliverables and things we're going to do on the ground from the get-go. With the information that you've been circulated, there is the online survey, which is being hosted through Involve. There are also printed questionnaires that are available in our libraries, and we are hosting pop-up engagement activities across the borough in various places. The deadline for the consultation is the 18th of December. And I think it's important, just following some of the notes that Catalin has sent me, that this is an important partnership strategy for the borough, and plans are being made to keep the council's governance structures, including the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, informed of the progress with the delivery of the strategy. In order to achieve this, to achieve this in an efficient way, the recommendation of this paper is that communities partnership and officers update the community environment panel, which is within the recommendations of the report, on a regular basis, and that the chair of the panel updates the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. So I am of course happy to answer any questions that I can. Any of those more detailed questions that I can't, will certainly take away and make sure that the Commission have the answers in full.
Any questions for the Chief Executive, recognising what she's just said? Okay, thank you. There are two recommendations on page 137 of the agenda, 2.1 and 2.2. Do we have a proposer for those recommendations? Councillor Barnard, you happy to propose? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Penfold? All those in favour? That's agreed. Thank you, Sue. You're not on the next agenda item, so that's good news. Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to agenda item 11, work programme updates. First of all, I will invite me to provide the Environment and Communities panel update. We have just completed our taking evidence from Councillor Purnell. Prior to that, we had Councillor Keith House, who is the leader of Eastleigh Council, who have got a very innovative housing agenda. And you may have seen Eastleigh on the slides that Thames Valley Police provided earlier on. Actually, they are a very similar borough to us. It was a very constructive and insightful presentation on a genuinely different approach to providing affordable and social housing. Our next module, and hopefully final, is talking to the registered providers. We have not succeeded in getting a witness from Abbury at this point, and recognising their significance to our borough, with over 7,000 homes, we will keep focusing on them. We will not finish the panel until we have spoken to them. That's the environment and communities. Moving on to Education, Skills and Growth panel, is Councillor Watts available? Online?
Thank you, Chair. So the questionnaire has been sent to schools and we've had responses from 36 schools. On the 10th of November, we'll be meeting with the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People to ask questions and to take evidence. This will be followed by a private panel meeting to discuss and review recommendations. The final report will be, for recommendations, will be on track to be presented to this Commission on the 26th of February. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Eccleston, have you got anything to add at this time for your panel? Caroline?
Sorry, my mic wouldn't come on then. No, not at the moment. We're still waiting. We were supposed to have a date for December to do the health in all policies, but we haven't had a date as yet. And as far as the JHOSC is concerned, until Frimley announce, that won't be sort of moving forward at the moment. But that's where we're at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving now to agenda item 12, overview and scrutiny panel membership. I invite Philip Sadler, Assistant Director, Democratic and Registration Services, to present.
Thank you very much, Chair. There isn't an awful lot to actually say about this item that isn't already included in the report. It's very much a procedural matter about updating the Commission's panels following the recent changes to the Council's political groups and proportional entitlements across those particular bodies. So the report presented in front of you just sets out the reasons and the rationale as to why that these have been presented. It is effectively a similar report to one that Council agreed last week around the updating of those committee memberships, but because of the Commission's responsibilities around appointing panels to undertake scrutiny work, it is the Commission's duty to agree to those changes and put into effect the changes proposed by the group leaders for their proportional entitlements to those panels. So happy to take any questions, but it is fairly straightforward.
Do we have any questions to Philip? If not, let's move to I ask for to move recommendation at 2.1 in the supplementary papers. Happy to move it.
Sorry, Mike, I had a quick question.
Okey-doke.
Philip?
Sorry, I missed you.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask quickly on that. It does say that for the JHOSC, obviously, Jerry with Donna as the substitute. You're not allowed substitutes on the JHOSC.
So
I just wanted to say that.
I'll take that away for consideration. The appointments to the JHOSC isn't actually a responsibility for the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, so it's a council appointment, but we will take that away. It may just mean that if that is the case, then it's a clerical amendment to the report that went to council, but it isn't a responsibility of the Commission to worry about it, as it were.
Thank you.
Okay, that makes sense. So Councillor Barnard's happened to second. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Assistant Director for attending agendas 1 to 11 to get to item 12. Thank you very much. At this point, I now declare the meeting closed.